Grüezi miteinander, ganz herzlich willkommen und einen wunderschönen guten Tag noch einmal vom WEF. Ich melde mich mit einer weiteren Sondersendung von Weltwoche Daily, die andere Sicht. Das World Economic Forum in Davos ist ja bekannt dafür, dass eben eine große Pluralität von Kulturen hier vertreten ist. Das sind eben nicht nur die alten, reichen, weißen Milliardäre und da die großen Politiker da hinter geschlossenen Türen, die da ihre Pläne ausbrüten, sondern es sind eben aus der ganzen Welt interessante, auch junge Menschen da. Und ich habe eine ganz spannende Gesprächspartnerin jetzt bei mir. I will switch immediately into English. I
highly recommend.
Ja, sie hat mich schon angemaßt, ich solle dann Englisch reden, das ist richtig. Es ist eine kenianische Social Entrepreneur, kann man das so zusammen? You're a Social Entrepreneur.
Social Innovator.
Social Innovator, Angela Gichaga aus Kenia, aus Nairobi, aus dem wunderbaren Kontinent Afrika. Und ich möchte von ihr natürlich wissen, warum sie am WEF ist, beziehungsweise was am WEF so faszinierend ist. Yeah, Angela, yes. What is fascinating at this WEF? What strikes you as, what is interesting? Why are you here?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to have this conversation. I'm fascinated because three things. One, this is a platform for conversation. And maybe people underestimate the value of conversation, and I'm glad that to just see the diverse groups that are represented here from different sectors, from different regions, being open to have a conversation. I do think, as I mentioned to you, we need to quickly move from talk to action, and there's a lot of action happening from different social entrepreneurs who are here, social innovators, governments are acting, private sector are acting, and so this platform to have a conversation to agree and align on how to move forward, as well as to showcase what is being done, is fantastic. I'd say the second is, you know, we are...
Let me just quickly
Yes.
translate for those non-native English speakers of our viewers. Angela hat mir gesagt, für sie das Interessante ist am WEF, dass natürlich hier so viele Menschen zusammenkommen, miteinander reden und bei allem Ungenügen, das natürlich auch diesen Konversationen anhaftet und manchmal ist auch zu viel geredet und zu wenig gehandelt, können das eben doch wertvolle Impulse geben. Aber jetzt wollte sie gerade einen zweiten Punkt sagen. Now you wanted to make your second point here.
Yes, so beyond just conversation and talking to each other, it's an opportunity to also challenge our mindsets, to challenge what we believe and the constructs we have in our mind, because we are interacting with multiple people from different sectors.
Let me just say, also das Zweite, ganz interessant, hier würde natürlich auch das Conventional Wisdom, unsere vorgefassten Meinungen über den Haufen geworfen, weil wir mit so vielen verschiedenen Menschen immer wieder reden müssen.
And because you have an opportunity to talk to people from those regions and get different perspectives, it's not just about talking and having a conversation, it's about challenging the mindsets. The third is looking around, and these are special times. We have polycrisis, we have climate crisis, we have war, there's so many negative situations that we find ourselves currently in, and it's an opportunity to actually renew our hope, right? There's definitely a lot that needs to be done. There's more to be done, and we need to be acting. We need to move from conversation and talk to action, but it's also good to make sure that we're having a balanced view that there is progress that's being made. Both of us were sitting next to each other in a panel just now, where we had heads of state and presidents challenging each other around the differences between the political differences, right?
Let me just quickly introduce. Sie hat noch eben gesagt, dass natürlich ganz wichtig ist, dass wir jetzt in einer vielfachen Krise leben. Das ist natürlich auch ein Schock, dass so viele Probleme bestehen, die man kalibrieren muss. Und dann hat sie angesprochen, diese Sitzung, wo wir eben waren, da haben ein paar ganz bedeutende WEF-Persönlichkeiten, die hier regelmäßig dabei sind, über die Problematik von Nord-Süd gesprochen, den Nord-Süd-Graben. Let us touch this issue of the panel we just saw before, where there was this the gap between the North and the South, Africa, the North, the West. Let me throw in another thought which was not addressed here. at the moment in Europe there is big talk about the refugee crisis. There are coming lots of people from Africa, not from Kenya. Your country seems to be in a good shape, but others are not so well run. And they're coming here, and this causes a lot of distress. This is also an aspect of this relationship between North and South. How do you see that problem, the gap between the North and the South, and also this refugee crisis, which steers a lot of discontent at the moment in Europe?
Okay, so this is not my area of expertise.
Sure. I mean, your personal.
This is a personal
thought.
opinion and doesn't represent that of my organization. I have a couple of viewpoints. One, it's interesting that when people move from one part of the world to the other, the difference between being called an expatriate and being called a refugee and being called a migrant for the same action in different directions. So I think there's a language issue there.
Okay.
And it's
Es
actually
ist das interessant. Also sie sagt, ja, bei manchen sagt man, es ist halt ein Expat, also ein normaler Emigrant, jemand, der ein anderes Land hat, und bei anderen sind es dann halt die Migranten, seien auch sprachliche Finessen, die da zum Teil zu wenig gesehen werden.
But the truth is, it's a failure of systems, and it's a failure of leadership. It's a failure of the global system. It's a failure of all of us. We cannot ignore history. We cannot ignore how we got to where we are as a world, how the world and the current economic system was built, and we cannot ignore that history. So the question then becomes, where do we draw the line around refugee and migration? We seem to be focused on the last 5 years, and I'm not undermining the importance of that conversation, but where have you stopped drawing the line? Because if you go back to the history, how far back do you go to talk about refugee and migration? Because the world was formed by people moving from different contexts and different geographies, right? So I do think that in broad terms, if we want to seriously get to the root causes of the issues, we can draw a line and say, we're not going to look into the 19th century or the 18th century and how we, as whatever people we are in Europe, ended up where we are. We're just going to draw a line and say, it's only within the last 5-10 years we're having this crisis of a particular region bringing people to Europe. So
Sie sagt, man soll auch bei dieser Migrationsthematik auch nicht einfach irgendwo beliebig eine Linie ziehen, sondern die Menschen hätten sich immer bewegt, und man müsse sehen, was dann wirklich genau die Ursachen sind und was die globale Tendenz ist, und am Schluss ist es eine Folge auch der Krise natürlich von großen Systemen, wirtschaftlicher Zusammenarbeit etc. I mean, there is a lot of talk about all the problems we have now. They look at Ukraine, they look at the Middle East. Now you are a young woman from Africa, from Kenya. You're a social innovator. You are now here in Switzerland. What are the priorities from you as a woman from Kenya when you will look at the world? Are these also the priorities that you would say the big problems for me as a Kenyan? That's the war in Ukraine. That's the Middle East, or what are your priorities? Where would you say are the issues, the main stories that should be addressed?
Yeah, and I'll just tie this question to the previous question, because I talked about leadership and systems.
Yes.
And the truth is, it's interesting that we are one world and one system. We choose to draw boundaries when it suits us, and we choose not to draw boundaries when it doesn't suit us. So that's the first thing. And to that point around a global system, whether or not anyone knows where physically Ukraine is, because of the global village and the global system that we exist in, the war in Ukraine will affect us.
It affects you too.
It affects, because all the fertilizers, the food crops,
sure.
fuel, it has a global impact. And so a challenge in one part of the world will have an impact in the other part of the world. We can't put our heads in the sand as ostriches and say we are ignoring what's happening. But again, that becomes to the point I made around a global system. We are a global system, and we cannot ignore that, right? And what happens negatively somewhere else will have negative effects across the world in one way or another, right? And then there's a challenge of leadership, and I'll bring this again for the previous comment about migration and refugee, and the current comments you've asked me, right? There's a failure of leadership across the entire world. There's a failure of leadership with the institutions that exist, as we came from this previous conversation, with institutions in the north that don't have a fair level playing field for all countries and all regions.
So it's the discrimination of the south.
There is a failure of the leadership, right? To have equal access, equity in access, not equal access, because we're not all starting from a same problem. The rules, the regulations, you came to Kenya in 1989. You showed up in our airport, you walked into our country. Do you know what it took for me to come here to Switzerland?
No.
No, exactly. And that is therein begins to be the problem. And that's not even the worst situation, right? We are all human beings, but it seems some of us are more equal than others. And I think that mindset that we have at individual level is represented in some of the global institutions. The other issue around failure of leadership, and we cannot ignore this, is there's also a failure of leadership within the global south to be able to provide a conducive environment to retain the talent. Now, at the end of the day, if they are people who have opportunities outside, economic migrants, right? People who go and they have the skill sets to offer in other parts of the world. Education, exposure, experience across the globe is fantastic. And if people have an opportunity to do that, that would be great. And if they are able to repatriate and give back resources to the continent, to grow the continent, that is fantastic, right? The challenge becomes when it's forced, where someone feels they do not have an opportunity in their home country and they have to go to other countries. And it's not a unique situation in Africa. It's a situation that happens in so many other parts of the world, right? And the question that becomes, what can we do to strengthen the systems in our regions so that people move out of choice as opposed to out of circumstance or out of need. And that is, again, to some extent part of the work that we do as an institution is how do we strengthen our governments to provide the healthcare and within so that people at least know they can be healthy, and then other parts of the governments can provide policies so that private sector can thrive and create the jobs for people. So that then someone can sit down and decide, do I want to stay? Do I want to go to Rwanda? Do I want to go to Europe? Do I want to, as a choice, because they have something of value to offer, as opposed to as a circumstance where because they feel. But then again,
I have to translate because otherwise our
you don't have subtitles.
Well, we will add them, but for those who watch it immediately, the translation will take time. Nein, es geht einfach darum. Sie hat gesagt, das große Problem sei natürlich auch ein Lack of Leadership im Norden. Es würden die Südenstaaten ungerecht behandelt, zum Teil mit die gleichen Menschen, andere Auflagen beim Reisen und so weiter. Und aber auch im Süden große Probleme der Leadership, dass eben die Infrastrukturen gar nicht da sind für grundsätzliche Bedürfnisse und auch Möglichkeiten zu schaffen, und sie arbeitet in diesem Bereich, also sie arbeitet dann eben auch mit Regierungen zusammen. One last question, because you have to rush. I don't want you to miss your next meeting, but one question. Kenya, our viewers do not know Kenya so well.
How do you not know?
I mean, we know.
Don't you have internet?
No, we know, but we don't. I mean, I'd say not so well. We don't know.
Do you not know Kenya?
No. But
that is by choice. Not
we have to be precise. I didn't say we don't know Kenya. Of course, we know Kenya. We don't know it so well. So now let me ask my question.
Yes.
Question is, what is for you the greatest news from Kenya? Or to phrase it more generally, what impresses you about your country? What's the message, one could say, of Kenya to the world? What's the impressive thing about your country? What makes you proud of being a Kenyan?
I love my country. I love Kenya. I love Africa, and I'm a Pan-African. I just happen to be born in Kenya. I love my country. I love the resilience of the people. I love that they're hardworking. I love that we have hope. I love that we continue to apply ourselves. I love our weather. Love our weather. I don't need an AC. I don't need a heater. I love the fact that despite our differences, we do tend to find a way to have difficult conversations and move forward. I love that we are quick to learn. I love that we are quick to figure out how our systems works and then also find ways to, bypass systems. I love that creativity, that innovation. I love the fact that we are able to challenge our leadership and we are free to speak. I love that we are willing to go to places and try new things. Any country where you go and you don't find a Kenyan, please know that there's no great opportunity in that country, because if it was there would be a Kenyan there trying to make it work. So I love that about us. I love the fact that despite challenges, we will continue to rise. I love the fact that you can come and ask me questions out of the blue and I'm not worried about being able to speak my mind. And I love that I'm able to also challenge you. And I mean, if your audience does not know any country in this world, it would be unfortunate with the readily available internet and Wi-Fi not to Google or use any other platform to educate yourself, because ignorance in this day and age is not acceptable.
I'm sure they will now Google immediately and know everything about Kenya, Angela.
And all the other 54 member states of their wonderful African continent.
Great. Thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you so much.
Wish you all the best and an interesting meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you
So much for your time.
Thank you. Meine Damen und Herren, ich habe mich jetzt ausgiebig bedankt und Sie haben es gesehen. Angela hat mich streng ermahnt, man müsse also mehr Bescheid wissen da über die afrikanischen Länder und über Kenia. Und ich habe gesagt, klar, jetzt werden alle unsere Zuschauer sofort googeln, was Kenia ist, was es bedeutet. Und sie hat gesagt, warum sie Kenia liebt. Die Resilienz, die Tüchtigkeit, die Arbeitsamkeit, das schöne Wetter, dann eben die Mentalität der Leute, die sich nicht unterkriegen lassen, dann auch, dass sie frei reden könne, ohne irgendetwas befürchten zu müssen. Sie sei eine begeisterte Kenianerin und auch eine begeisterte Afrikanerin. Angela, many thanks again. Ihnen vielen Dank.
Danke schon.
Wunderbar.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Und wir verabschieden uns. Vielen Dank. Bleiben Sie dran. Merci.